Good evening, my friends. Today I'm gonna continue in 1 Samuel chapter 12 and try to really go into this passage about David's his slip up, his mistake. Everybody wants to talk about David slaying Goliath, but nobody wants to talk about how David committed murder and adultery, right? But I think it's so important because I'll be honest with you, David saved my life. I mean, Jesus saved my life, but it was because of the illumination that I had of David's life and understanding God's grace and his mercy and how compassionate and loving and good God is. But even in the midst of judgment, even in the midst of failure and making mistakes, being able to see how we are to respond even when we slip up and get up and keep going to God, even if we provoke him to execute judgment upon us, and just enduring that. So I'm going to continue. I was talking yesterday about why Nathan came and he said the parable of the lamb, and I'm just going to start in verse 5. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man that killed the lamb, or whatever, and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man that has done this thing shall surely die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your bosom, and gave you the house of Israel and the land of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have moreover given such unto you. Wherefore have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. And I'm going to go back up here. So David hears this story, and he's furious, and man, it's amazing how, the wisdom of the Lord. But he says, David pronounces his own judgment right here. He prophesies it. He says, he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and because he had no pity. This was what David did. He had no pity on Uriah, and he just took his wife. But now he has to repay fourfold, like I explained yesterday. But David knows this law, right? He knows the law of the lamb being stolen and being slain and having to repay fourfold. So that's why he says what he says. David knew the law. That's good, right? So Nathan tells him, you're the man. And God, just goes in to tell him, like, look, I did all these things for you. And I love what he says here. The Lord, just think about what the Lord is saying to him. He's saying, like, I did all these things for you. And if that wasn't enough, I would have given you more. Like, all you had to do was ask. You know what I mean? Why is it that you've gone and done this thing? You didn't even ask me. Like, I think that's so deep to me. Like, how often we just fall into sin because it's like we think that the Lord is trying to withhold some deep pleasure from us, or something pleasurable from us, and we're like, oh Lord, do we even ever approach him about those things? I'm trying to start approaching God like, look, this is what I want. Even if I think it's messed up, I'm just honest, like, Lord, like, this is what I want. And even if it's wrong, I have to be honest about it. Like, I'm putting myself out here because whatever that desire is within us, that sin is working in us when we know it's contrary to the law, there's something, like, God satisfies everything. Just think about when you're in his presence. Everything is satisfied in him. So he could satisfy all our desires at his right hand, our pleasures forevermore. So when our flesh is rebelling and we're like lusting after something which is contrary to what God has commanded us, we should just channel that lust and be like, Lord, look, you see what I'm desiring? Like, help me with that. That's messed up. And I know that you could give me something that would satisfy that, or you could help me overcome this moment. And he will. And he says, wherefore did you do this and kill Uriah the Hittite and take his wife? So David despised the commandment of the Lord. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. It's important to understand that. Let's not gloss over what David did. David did evil, but this is a man after God's own heart. This is a man after God's own heart. And he was capable of doing evil and rejecting the commandment of the Lord. So let's just soak that in. Let's just keep soaking that in about David and God's grace and how good God is, and how God desires to give us great things. And we really limit ourselves by not asking and just trying to satisfy these desires ourselves. But let's keep going into this tomorrow. Good night.